Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are talking about set 3 cards that have potential for the future. So, as you know, I consider set 3 to be a very weak set for competitive play, but it doesn't mean that there's no card that I think can potentially be very powerful for the future. So, today I would like to talk about specifically cards that either are pretty strong but have potential to grow a lot more, a card that, depending on the specific meta, could be extremely powerful, or cards that do something very unique and could enable some very powerful combos. So, before we start this video, I just would like to ask you to like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Let me know, and thank you so much for supporting my work. So, I have the first category of cards from Twilight of the Republic that I call Will Get Better, which are cards that are already competitively playable or sometimes even quite powerful, but I think have a lot of potential to get a lot stronger in the future. Because right now they're very limited by the card pool, which is still relatively small since the game is not even a year old. The first card is obviously Now There's Two of Them. So now there's only one competitive deck that really utilizes Now There's Two of Them, which is the Cad Bane Red. I mean, you could also argue the Queenland Red is also using Now There's Two of Them. But it's still a card that remains fairly niche, and I believe that this card is only going to grow in popularity as the card pool expands, because right now there's two of them as a non-vehicle restriction as well as a trait restriction, which obviously limits a lot. The unit needs to share the same trait, so there's quite a few limitations that prevent this card from seeing a wide amount of play. But I believe that as we get more cards, we only gonna get it's only gonna be easier and easier to build a deck that can utilize this card. For example, at the moment, a Cad Bane can utilize this card just because Underworld is one of the most common traits that we can find in all of Star Wars. Like Star Wars Limited, really, Underworld is really the most common trait that we have in the game right now. And I believe that as the game gets more and more expansions, we're gonna reach a critical mass of cards in more than just one category. There's gonna be, maybe we're gonna reach a critical mass of Rebel card, Imperial card, that will allow Now There's Two of Them to be a lot easier to use. So I think this card has potential to grow in the future. I don't think it's ever gonna be like busted or gonna dominate the meta or anything like this, but it definitely has room to grow. The second card is Stella Guerrera, and I believe even though this card once again is definitely playable at the moment and definitely a very powerful card, especially in very like card advantage based grindy matchups, I believe it has rooms to grow because right now it's still pretty limited by the amount of tactic that you can get from her. But once again, as the card pool expands, we're only going to see more events and more tactic, which means that Stella Guerrera is going to have a wider array of different cards that you can get. I believe that making a toolbox for Stella Guerrera is going to become easier and easier. And right now, you really have to build specifically. You don't necessarily have to build specifically for her, but there's certainly you always have to be aware of the amount of tactic that you have in your deck. And I think she's only gonna grow like more popular and more powerful as more tactic gets printed, just by the sheer diversity of different cards you can possibly get to. Because right now it's mostly like a card advantage tool, but it can be much more than this because she also gives you a wide selection, can dig up to top 8 cards, which meant that she can offer you not only, of course, the card advantage, but also card selection. Right now, the card selection aspect of the card is a little bit undermined by the fact that we're still limited by the tactics, which are mostly just removal or pillage, which is not super diverse. But there's definitely going to be a growing in diversity of different powerful tactics you can possibly grab from her. Finally, my favorite, Count Dooku. So right now, Count Dooku, I think, suffers a lot from the deck building restriction. And the big deck building restriction for Count Dooku is that obviously his ability only works for Separatists. So right now, unfortunately, we don't have that many Separatists. And the Separatist cards are, in my opinion, a bit on the weaker side. I think that Count Dooku is, more than any other leader in the game, is suffering a lot from set 3 being relatively weak because the leader himself is very strong. It's just that, unfortunately, the rest of the card pool in Twilight of the Republic is simply not strong enough to really take advantage of his ability, which only works for Separatist. If Count Dooku ability, for example, was working on Underworld or Imperial, it would be so much stronger because there's just a lot of powerful Underworld and Imperials. And in that sense, the ability to reduce the cost of those units becomes insanely powerful. The problem is, once again, it's just too restricted in the amount of Separatist card. A lot of those Separatist cards already have exploits, so they don't really benefit a lot from getting an additional exploit. So the categories of card that don't have exploit and are Separatists, they're relatively far and few between, and most of them are not that powerful. So it's a little bit difficult to use Count Dooku at the moment, but I believe, for example, if Fantasy Flight Games prints a new set of card that is based on the Clone War, and we got a lot more Separatists, and there's no exploit, so basically you get all those Separatists which are costed without the price reduction in mind, and then you are able to give those cards price reduction in order to make them completely broken. This is where Count Dooku can really, really benefit from this. So I believe that Count Dooku, from that angle, has the potential to be very, very powerful. Of course, nobody knows when is the next time we're gonna have Clone War era expansion being released, but if it ever happens, Count Dooku will definitely be the first card I will think about building a deck around. The next category are the meta-dependent cards, so cards that are not really strong right now, but could become very strong if a specific meta comes into mind. Obviously, there's many different cards that can come into that category, so I'm just taking the most obvious cases. And we're going to start off by Sly Moore. So obviously this card is a bit of a controversy because there's actually a spelling mistake on that card. It says take control instead of saying take control, so there's a missing R on that card. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is going to be errata, so she says obviously takes control, because right now, of course, take control doesn't do anything, but take control obviously pretty good. So obviously her ability to take control of a token unit and ready it. So what is very powerful about her is like she's relatively cheap, she gives you a pretty solid body, and if there's a token in play, as she comes to play, since she becomes very powerful. So we're already seeing with the jump to light speed that we're gonna have additional tokens. We're gonna have notably 2/2 X-wing in space. So we don't know what are the plans for Twilight. So for Twilight of the Republic. So sorry, for Star Wars Unlimited, in terms of tokens. But if it's the same thing as in Magic, we can imagine insanely powerful tokens being printed for the game. Like there's no limits on the power. In Magic the Gathering, you can have stuff like as crazy as a 2020 indestructible as a token. So really, the potential for token units is really big, and obviously having a unit that is able to take control of those for such a low resource count, and not only does it take control, but it also readies the unit. So it's better than a Change of Hearts, because Change of Hearts take control only does not ready the unit, while this readies the unit, which is a pretty big deal. So I think obviously right now this card is way too specialized, and it turns out that tokens units are fairly small and not so powerful, but as the game becomes older and as more powerful tokens get printed, Sly Moore can become a very powerful card, even if it's only a sideboard card. So obviously our use is going to be fairly niche, but she could become a very powerful cause in the future. Number 2, we have Lux Bonteri, a card that is already playable in my opinion, that does see a little bit of play. The 3/2 stat line is not bad. But I think what is very interesting about him is obviously this ability to basically exhaust a unit when something that has been played but paid less than what the card cost is. So it obviously works in Exploit. Unfortunately, Exploit not super playable right now. It's very strong against triple Dark Raid, that kind of thing. So right now it is fairly niche, but I believe that in a lot of combo decks are usually based on this ability to kind of cheat a unit in play, and more often than not get this unit into play ready so it can attack right away. And there's a lot of combo decks that are based like this, at least in Magic. So this kind of I'm basing a lot of those assumptions based on Magic, because I know how a game can possibly evolve. And obviously, Star Wars Unlimited is still, at the end of the day, still a game that is relatively close to Magic in the way it works. So in that context, I think this card has the potential to be some sort of what we call in Magic like a hate bear, which is kind of like a pretty decently stacked unit that has a permanent effect on it that can really annoy the opponent and block its strategies. And Lux Bonteri is a very good example for this. And I believe that depending on how the game evolves and certain combo decks come into play that have this ability to kind of cheat a unit into play and put it into play ready, then Lux Bonteri can become really strong, because it just says, well, now you guys is basically exhausted. We also already seeing this with Triple Dark Raid. We already see this, seeing this with Sneak Attack. So we know that FFG is willing to print that kind of effect. And if ever that kind of effect gets broken by a specific combo decks, well, we have a ready answer here with this cheap and very efficient answer. Next, there's obviously Shadowed Intentions. Basically, I've rated this card as the best mono yellow card of set 3. This might be a misjudgment, because it turns out that this card is just a lot more situational and a lot more difficult to make it work than I initially anticipated. But it doesn't change the fact that the potential of the card is still very, very high, giving that ability to turn a unit and makes its unit incredibly more difficult to kill, depending on the meta, can become extremely, extremely powerful. So I still believe that even though it might not be at the moment the best yellow card in a set, it can definitely become one of the best cards in the set, depending on a certain context, a certain combo. We already talked, of course, the combo with Chirrut. Who knows what card is going to be printed in the future in which Shadow Intention can combine and become extremely broken. So it's typically the kind of card that can become incredibly more powerful depending on what's happening. Right now, we are already seeing the new Chewbacca from Jump to Lightspeed, which is kind of giving the same kind of protecting ability, but also gives you a lot of stats and also gives you a unit that is kind of better than Shadow Intention, but it's still not doing quite what Shadow Intention does. And I believe that in the context of a combo deck, I can see Shadow Intention still being a very, very strong ability. Moving on, we got Brain Invaders. I already said that this card has the potential to be quite powerful in the right meta. It's very, very strong against any leader that is really basing itself on its leader's ability, that is really leaning on its leader's ability. Right now, at the moment, there's not really any... The meta is not exactly the right meta for Brain Invaders. There's plenty of decks that don't mind having their leader's ability being turned off, and also having to turn off your own leader ability can be a very downside as well. I still think Brain Invaders has a lot of potential for the future, as it does something that simply no other card in the game can do, and I can definitely see some combo decks that are kind of based on their leader's ability. Once again, we're kind of thinking about the same idea as Lux Bonteri, as the idea of a unit that can really hate on the opponent's strategy, and is available for all colors. Next, we got Aggrieved Parliamentarian. It's only a matter of time until FFG prints an archetype that is based on the discard pile. So basically, the idea, pretty much every card game has some sort of strategy that is based on the discard pile. Right now, we don't have we have a few cards that interacts with the discard pile, obviously with Bounty Hunter Cruise, Palpatine's Baton, that kind of thing. But overall, there hasn't been any archetypes that is focused on the discard pile. But I truly believe that it's only a matter of time until we see one. And if that archetype ever becomes very dominant, Aggrieved Parliamentarian is for now the best answer we have to those kind of archetypes, because obviously it gives you a body, a 2/2 body that has an immediate impact on the game, and I will completely shuffle the opponent discard pile at the bottom of their deck, which is just a very, very powerful effect to basically kind of, because obviously those decks are going to be trying to put some stuff in their discard pile and then trying to abuse their discard pile using effect that interacts with it. So Aggrieved Parliamentarian completely blocks that kind of strategies, as well as giving you a 2/2 body. So it's a very good card potentially for the future of the game. And once again, it's available to all colors. Next, we have Unmasking the Conspiracy. Once again, as we are leaning towards maybe more of a meta that is focused on combo strategies and combo decks, Unmasking the Conspiracy and selective discards is going to become a lot more powerful. Unmasking the Conspiracy is the only selective discard that is available to all villainy and heroism, and is also very cheap. And being cheap, once again, as the game is going to speed up, as the game is going to become faster and faster, being cheap is going to become more and more of a quality. Obviously, you have to discard a card to make it happen, but we know that in Star Wars Limited, when you're able to draw 2 cards per turn, having to do a 2-for-1 is not necessarily the end of the world, especially if it allows you to discard the crucial card that will prevent your opponent from killing you. So, in my opinion, as the game is going to become faster and faster, and as we're going to be focusing more and more on combo decks, Unmasking the Conspiracy is only going to grow into popularity. It might not be the most, I would say, the best card in Premiere, but it might be very strong in whatever Eternal format we're going to be into, meaning by that a format that will basically allow to play any sort of cards. And those kind of formats typically tend to become super combo focused as the card pool expand to a certain level. Next, we have obviously Execute Order 66, which is obviously a card that is a hard counter to Jedi units, as not only it is an AoE effect that kills all Jedi units, and also allows you to put a Clone Trooper into play for each Jedi killed that way. And it only costs 4 and is available to any black deck. So this card, obviously, right now, the Jedi, there's not enough Jedi to really justify playing this card in your sideboard. And even some of the best Jedi being played, like for example Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knights, are 6/7 and won't die to such a card. But obviously, as the card pool expand, and I'm sure at some point we're gonna see some Jedi archetype being pushed by a Fantasy Flight game. We know that the name of the expansions of set 5 and set 6 is gonna be Secret of Power and Legend of the Force. We're definitely gonna be expecting a lot of Jedi coming out of those sets, and obviously in this context, Execute Order 66 could become an extremely powerful card depending on what happens. So basically, this is kind of my ideas of like the card that jump to me are cards to, they are not necessarily, like as I said, the card that obviously are necessarily the best right now, but they're the kind of card that you need to be aware that those cards exist, because the day they become useful, they're gonna become extremely useful. So my advice would be to collect, so you get your playset of those cards, and then keep an eye on those, because as the game is gonna expand, for sure those cards are gonna see a lot of play. My next category are combo dependent cards, so the cards that are not really good by themselves but could become very powerful in combination with other things. Typically, we're going to talk about cards that are that do an effect, to do something that no other card in the game can do. So they have a very, very unique effect. First example is Sandhill. So Sandhill is very cool because he has this ability that allows you to ready resources whenever he attacks for each enemy units that got defeated this phase. And obviously the immediate combo with Sandhill is the fact that whenever he attacks, he gets to ready resource. So whenever you play him, he gets to exploit, so you get to defeat resources. You can play Sandhill for free if you defeat 3 units to play Sandhill. And then if you combine him with an energy conversion lab or any sort of effect that gives him ambush, you can attack right away and you can actually get resource back and gain your resource back. So this card is not amazing because it really needs a lot of stuff to actually work, and even if it works, the resources need to line up in such a way that you actually get advantage of the units. But it is definitely a card that has the potential to become super broken with the given combo. So right now there's already been a combo that has been identified by the K2OD crews. They've basically worked on a combo where basically you can have something like an Admiral Modi. I'm talking the 1/1 Modi for 2 that readies a black unit, and it also combines with Admiral Trench, which remember can whenever he comes into play, you can get back all the units that got defeated that turn. So basically, there's a combo that involves Sandhill being played with Ambush using ECL, exploding a bunch of units, readying resources, and then you get to sacrifice your Army Armada, you get to ready your Sandhill, and then you get to ready resources, and then you can basically loop that around using Trench, getting back the Modi. So I'm not going to explain the details on how that works, but it does work. But you need to have 2 Trench for this to happen. You obviously need to have a board. You need to start with, I think, at least 9 resources for this to work. And if you do this, you basically get infinite resources and infinite damage, basically, which is it's kind of an historical moment for Star Wars Unlimited because it is effectively the first infinite combo that has been identified for the game. So just for that fact alone, I think the K2OD should get credits for that. But I think what is so obviously this combo is unrealistic in a competitive game of Star Wars Unlimited. It's never going to be able to be set up. It's way too easy to counter. But if you can, but it is definitely good to be aware of those combos because honestly, as new cards get printed, obviously there might be some combos that might actually make this more efficient, more consistent, and more powerful. And I think Sandhill is really the unique key card that is needed for that combo. So Sandhill is a potential combo card that can do infinite resources. And that alone is worth mentioning because obviously there's a potential here that can potentially be broken. Moving on, we got Aid for the Innocent. So Aid of the Innocent is kind of like, think about U-Wing reinforcement, but specifically for events. Obviously, Aid for the Innocent is not as good as U-Wing reinforcement because you need to because it's basically only works for, it doesn't give you as much flexibility because it only works for heroic non-unit cards, so it's a lot more limited. It also only does a cost reduction of 2, so it can only allow you to play a card that costs 2 or less. So obviously it's a lot more limited, but as I said earlier, as the card pool expands, we can definitely see more and more target for Aid from the Innocent. In terms of, as we're getting more heroic non-unit cards, we could definitely see Aid from the Innocent becoming more and more powerful, as obviously it digs very deep and allows you to search 2 of those cards simultaneously. There's obviously combo potential. What is very powerful with this kind of combo is that basically one of the main problem with Star Wars Unlimited in terms of like combo potential is that you play a card, then your opponent gets to interact, then you play a card. So let's say you have a 2-card combo involving 2 heroism event cards. You got to play the first one first, and then your opponent gets to interact, and then you get to play the other one, and then eventually you get to do whatever you want. But with Aid of the Innocent, you can actually play those 2 cards simultaneously, which makes it basically a 1-card combo that cannot be interacted with because it happens in one action. So I think in that sense, Aid from the Innocent has the potential to be very powerful, even if there's no crazy combo happening with the non-heroism card. Just the idea of a kind of like a mini U-Wing reinforcement can potentially be very powerful, but we just need to have a critical mass of heroism non-unit card that needs to be added to the game for this to have enough fuel to actually work. But this has a lot of potential for the future. Moving on, we got Satine Cries. So Satine Cries is a very interesting card because it's effectively kind of the only way to reliably meal someone. I mean, you can meal someone using Vigilance, but that's more like kind of a win condition for a control deck. It's not really like an aggro meal, something that can really meal like 30-40 cards from your opponent. Satine Cries is the only card in the game right now that can actually meal you a significant amount of cards by itself. Obviously, every time she taps down, she can meal 3, but obviously you can boost her with some sort of like entrench and stuff like this allows us to meal you 5 cards every turn, and 5 cards every turn is just ridiculous. It's a lot of cards. So I think Satine has a lot of potential of a card that could be a win condition for some sort of control deck based on units, which right now is not really possible. And the problem with control-based units is like more often it's more efficient to just simply kill your opponent once you have the advantage by attacking with your units, rather than just using Satine to try to mill them out. But we can imagine in the future a deck that would be playing tons of cards similar to Satine, cards that basically have very strong control potential, but have a very low attack value and a very high health value. Like stuff, we need card like, for example, card like Moisture Farmer that have high health, that gives you heal, that gives you a way to stay alive, and can just win the game by just milling. And so the way I imagine this deck working would be to kind of like play all those super high health units with low attack that kind of give you a very powerful controlling effect. And once you manage to control the game with those and you get a critical mass, then you can play Satine, and then you can start tapping down everything and you mill your opponent in 1 or 2 turns. Unfortunately, this deck is not really possible right now, but it is potentially possible in the future, and Satine Cries, of course, would enable a deck like this to work. So I think it has a lot of potential, and once again, it has a very unique effect that makes her potentially dangerous. Next, we'll go back a little bit on the leaders, and there's obviously Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is actually a very underrated leader, because he has one of the best leader deploy in the game. 4/7 Sentinel is just very, very powerful whenever you know that your opponent cannot use removal to kill you. Like, there's simply just obviously Obi-Wan Kenobi dodges most of the removals in the game because he's a leader. He cannot be bounced, cannot be Fail the Dragon, cannot be Vanquish. There's just like a lot of removal. So you just drop an Obi-Wan, and the fact that obviously you can deploy your leader for free gives you plenty of resources to actually add some upgrades on Obi-Wan. So one thing that works very well is simply just play Obi-Wan and just play something like a Yong to give +2/+2 to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and suddenly like Obi-Wan becomes just insurmountable. It becomes just, for certain decks, just cannot deal with this. It just so basically the idea of just deploying Obi-Wan and just putting a bunch of buffs on it is actually surprisingly powerful. So Obi-Wan is actually a pretty strong leader, has a very strong leader deploy in my opinion. The problem with Obi-Wan is the leader ability. The leader ability is is very situational. It's very rarely useful. Most of the time your opponent doesn't care about dealing damage to your units unless he can kill them. And so I think for Obi-Wan to become powerful, we need to have cards that basically gets benefit from healing. So a card that says that when this thing gets healed, do that. Like when you get healed, draw a card. When this thing gets healed, put an experience token on it. That kind of thing. We need to have cards that really, really synergize with the idea of healing your own units. And if that happens, then Obi-Wan has a lot of potential, because also he has very, very useful trait, False Jedi Republic. So I think the only ingredient that Obi-Wan needs in order to be a competitively viable leader would be some sort of synergies, a substantial amount of synergies with this heal. But I think it's only a matter of time until we get that. It's such an obvious design space to fill out by the FFG designers. I'll be shocked if we don't have some sort of healing synergies or even healing archetypes coming in the next few sets. So I like, for example, the secret. It would be like a very appropriate mechanic to put in the, for example, in the expansion Secret of the Force, or even during the Secret of Power, or Legend of the Force. Those two expansions seem to be very Force focused. So it would not be a stretch to think that some of those expansion will bring some sort of healing strategy that's going to make Obi-Wan becoming a real thing. So this is something that I'm really excited about, and I really wish they would have put more synergy and more support for Obi-Wan in this set. Last but not least, we got Pre Vizsla. So Pre Vizsla is kind of the same scenario as in Obi-Wan. It's a leader that I think has a lot of potential because he's a very strong leader to deploy. We're talking about a 4/6 for 5, which is a very good stats. And if you get it's a 4/6 for 5 saboteur almost always. And getting 6 cards in hands as Pre Vizsla deploys is not that difficult to do, and then he becomes a 6/6 saboteur for 5, which is some of the best stats we've ever seen in the game. It's arguably even better than the original Boba Fett, which were 4/7 for 5. So he's very, very strong leader deploy. The only problem with Pre Vizsla is like his leader's ability is just very bad. Dealing 1 damage for every card that you've drawn this turn, not counting the 2 cards you draw per turn, is just very difficult to use because most of the time you're gonna have to spend a substantial. First of all, card draw, like mass card draw, is not so good in the game. You don't really need to draw a bunch draw a bunch of cards, and Pre Vizsla wants you to do that. So it's kind of like doesn't synergize so well, and also you're spending your resource to draw a card. Most of the time you don't have enough resources to use the ability, which costs 1 resources. And even if you do, then it's going to deal like 2 damage, maybe maximum 3 damage, which is not even that impressive. So it's simply just very conditional, and even when it works, it's not amazing. However, we can definitely imagine cheaper way to draw cards. I'm mostly thinking about some sort of effect that would allow you to draw cards and then discard cards. Those kind of effects typically are a lot cheaper in card games because they don't represent pure card advantage. And this would be a way to get card draw into your deck and much more affordable, making his leader's ability much easier to use. So as I said, I think Pre Vizsla right now is not good because his leader's ability is not good enough, but I think that in the future, he has a lot of potential, and I think he's definitely one of the leaders who has the most potential among the one from set 3. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you'll enjoy, please like and subscribe, and let me know if there's any other card from from Twilight of the Republic which you think has potential for the future for any reason. And obviously let me know what are the reasons why you think this card has potential. Once again, I'm not necessarily saying that you should be jumping on those cards and getting them, that they're guaranteed going to become a powerhouse in the future, but as I said, in card game, we never know what's going to happen, and it's very difficult to predict the future. With that being said, I would definitely keep an eye on those cards to see, because knowing those leaders exist can sometimes give you an advantage in terms of like creating a new archetypes and building a new deck. So one of the most important factor about whenever you want to innovate and create a new archetypes is not only being aware about the new cards that are coming, but also being aware that of cards in the past that could have some untapped potential. And I think a lot of those cards that I talked about in these videos have untapped potential, and those is usually a very easy way to innovate in a card game. Thank you so much for following that video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.